If there is one thing that parenting has taught me, it's that I need to reserve the right to change my mind. I literally have to laugh when I think about some of the things that I was so certain about before I had children, or even after making a decision for my children. And then I would learn more or see how a decision played out, and I would need to change my mind. After adopting the concept of reserving the right to change my mind when it comes to parenting, I started to adopt it in other areas of my life. And the biggest area where I have been changing my mind in recent years has been around my health. If you had told me 2.5 years ago that I would one day drop gluten forever, I would have laughed in your face. In fact, I probably would have made some snarky remark about these crazy diet trends that I want no part of. And then I got diagnosed with Hashimoto's and I started researching. I realized that I needed to test out whether or not the internet was telling me the truth about gluten being the number one irritant for people with thyroid issues and Hashimoto's. And it didn't take long for me to realize that I would never eat gluten intentionally again. Today, I'm going to share 5 things that improved within 30 days of me dropping gluten. Hi, I'm Allison Egidi, a pediatric sleep and wellness coach and a mom of 2. I love to help parents find solutions. This is How Long Till Bedtime. If you're not currently gluten-free and you're still listening, I suspect that you're a curious person. And I love that about my audience because my curiosity has allowed me to reserve the right to change my mind on a variety of things, and I'm so grateful for that. I just want to be clear that I am not trying to change your mind on gluten today. I know that there are many people whose bodies can tolerate gluten, and if I'm being honest, I'm jealous of them. But I also know that I thought I was tolerating gluten until I realized that my poor body had been trying to tell me in many ways that it didn't like gluten, and I just wasn't listening or hearing it. So while gluten may not be an issue for you, I hope that this episode will inspire you to listen to your body because I ignored mine for almost 40 years. If you listened to episode 42, where I shared how I got diagnosed with Hashimoto's, you know that I ignored my doctor's recommendation to not worry about it because, according to him, there was, quote, nothing I could do about it. Rather than listen to him, I started doing lots of online research. I became my own WebMD. Like with all things on the internet, there were lots of conflicting ideas and thoughts around thyroid issues and Hashimoto's, but there seemed to be one through line amongst the people who were able to reduce their symptoms and or improve their blood work. They all had cut gluten. As a lover of pasta, bread, beer, and all the other yummy things that have gluten, I was, of course, really hoping that gluten was not part of my problem. But I also knew that I needed to test it out to prove that to myself. I decided to only change one thing at a time as I started my health journey because I wanted really clear answers, and I knew gluten needed to be the first thing that I tested out. My plan was to drop gluten for 30 days to see what would happen with my blood work because at the beginning, the blood work was all that I cared about. Why? Because I didn't even realize how many symptoms I was battling at that time. The very first thing I noticed after dropping gluten was that I quickly lost 10 pounds in less than 2 weeks. That, of course, got me thinking about the fact that I had committed to moving my body at least 3 times a week almost a year prior to me dropping gluten and getting diagnosed with Hashimoto's. And despite me getting in the best shape I had been in since college, I hadn't lost a pound. Of course, I was a bit surprised by that, but I just assumed it was me nearing 40 years old and I was going through that whole slowing metabolism that everyone talks about. But after all the reading I had done before dropping gluten, I realized that the only way I could drop 10 pounds that quickly was because I'd been dealing with significant inflammation that was caused by my body being irritated by gluten. By the end of week 3, I noticed another big change. I no longer had the desire to nap every afternoon. For years and years, I honestly can't remember exactly when it started, but for years, I would take a nap almost every Saturday and Sunday. During the week, I would often have that afternoon slump feeling, but of course, I powered through it because I was busy and working. But on the weekends, when things were a little bit slower and I was able to slow down, I always had to lay down every afternoon. Sometimes I would just rest, and other times I would sleep for an hour or two. I had never thought too much about it. I mean, I rationalized that need to nap because my dad had always been someone who napped every weekend for my whole childhood. I'm sure he still does it now. He just loved a nap. And I was a mom of 2 young children who worked full time. I mean, aren't all moms tired? Well, apparently not, because the urge to nap left me about 21 days after I dropped gluten. And I can count on one hand how many naps I've taken in the last 2.5 years. And they were all needed because I had not gotten enough sleep the night before or I had traveled. I had a really clear link to why I needed a nap those handful of times. But even typically, when I would not get enough sleep or be thrown off, without having gluten in my diet, I could power through without feeling like I needed to nap. To suddenly not have that urge to nap or to feel that afternoon slump, which I very rarely feel at this point, it was life changing. That's when I really started to think, oh no, I might not ever eat gluten again. The third thing I noticed as the end of the month approached was that my joint pain was virtually gone. If you listen to episode 17, where I talked about finding a fitness routine that stuck, I shared that I had significant joint pain when I first committed to moving my body 3 days per week. Everything would hurt from time to time. But the constants were my right knee that I'd had reconstructed, my left shoulder that flared up during my pregnancy with Addison, my left hip that had previously been injured in high school, and both of my ankles. Of course, I had injured everything. I mean, I had sprained those ankles multiple times and had that knee reconstructed and had an injury to that hip. And that shoulder was slightly unexplained, but it came up during my pregnancy. And so I had all these reasons that I was able to chalk up that discomfort and really irritating discomfort to old injuries. That's just what happens. You injure things and you have maybe early arthritis or those aches and pains. They just never really go away if you re aggravate them. And I just resigned myself to the fact that I wouldn't ever really work out super hard again. My days of sprinting were long behind me. And any 5Ks I wanted to do would be what I like to call walk-a-jogs because my joints hurt too much for me to run 3 consecutive miles. But as the month with no gluten went on, I realized that my aches and pains had pretty much gone away. By the end of the month, I started dabbling in HIIT Peloton classes that involved a good amount of sprinting. And I could run 3 consecutive miles around my hilly neighborhood with no swelling or joint pain afterwards. Holy smokes, what a great feeling that was. And I was able to take my workouts to the next level, which made the old athlete in me very happy. Oh my gosh, guys, it was starting to really sink in that my body had been dealing with a lot of inflammation, and I had been full of what seemed like rational explanations, but they were all wrong. The fourth change that I noticed was a significant reduction in my anxiety. For most of my adult life, I had been prone to waking in the middle of the night and worrying about things or thinking through things. When I was an investment banker, I remember how much I would wake up in the middle of the night and think about deals we were structuring and all the different ways we could go about it and thinking about what could go wrong if we structured it this way. I had to put the old, I think it's called a dictating machine. I remember complaining to my dad about it, and he gave me one of his old dictating machines where you could talk into it. And he would tell me, okay, when you wake up and you start running through all these things in your head that you have to do for that deal, just put it in the dictating machine so that your brain can kind of quiet down and go back to sleep. So I have lots of memories of recording into that little thing. And when I was a fundraiser, I would think about an email that I hadn't sent or responded to, or a call that I needed to make, or how we could structure a gift that a donor wanted to do. I was constantly thinking about the things that had to get done and how I could have done it better or things we could do differently. And once I became a parent, oh gosh, my mind could race in a circle on any number of things. I don't even think I need to give you guys examples because I'm sure you get it. Anything could set me off into wondering what was going to happen if my kids did this. What if this happened? What if this happened? Oh, I shouldn't have done that this way. I could just run in circles. But at some point, towards the end of my gluten free month, I realized that my mind wasn't racing as much. Dropping gluten didn't cure me waking up in the middle of the night. I wish it had. Many things can do that, and I have figured that out. I talk about that in episode 25. But it did reduce the anxious feeling I had during those wakings. And it reduced my general anxiety around everything: work, social, parenting, all the areas. It actually was another area that I had not even recognized. I had not processed how anxious I had been. I was operating in this kind of constant anxious state that was really blown up during the night. But once that anxiety was so significantly reduced, I couldn't even believe that I had been functioning that well with that level of kind of racing mind and worry for so long. The fifth change that I noticed in the first month was a significant reduction in bloating. I'm probably going to sound like a real idiot here, but I hadn't even realized I was bloated. If you had asked me, do you get bloated? I would have said, no, no, not really. I had dealt with a sensitive stomach ever since I was a child. So it was something that I was, I guess, somewhat accustomed to. And having occasional stomach issues or discomfort was not a big deal. And it was never so bad that I ever even thought about bringing it up to the doctor. I mean, who has a perfect stomach or digestive system? At first, I think I was so shocked by that quick weight loss that I don't think I realized that I was no longer getting bloated after I ate, because already my pants had loosened up because I lost weight. So it wasn't like I felt the difference. I had to go down a size in pants, and I wasn't really registering like, oh, I don't have that like overly full or want to unbutton my pants type feeling anymore. But when I did finally test eating gluten again to see what would happen, the bloating came along with the achy body and the anxiety, and it made me realize that I had been getting bloated when I would eat, and my stomach/digestive issues were basically gone. So after I ate gluten, I suddenly had that, oh, I might need to unbutton my pants feeling that I guess had been fairly constant before because I hadn't really thought much of it. And let me tell you guys, it's kind of awesome to eat and not deal with bloating. It was once again one of those things that I just hadn't really been paying attention to or realized that it was really happening until it was gone. So, those are 5 things that I noticed within just about 30 days of dropping gluten. As I just mentioned, I did test eating gluten to see what would happen. And within hours, I knew that I was officially done with gluten. I woke up during the night feeling anxious, bloated, and very achy and uncomfortable. And of course, I've had some accidental run ins with gluten over the last couple of years, and I've had that same reaction. The only thing I can compare my reaction to is what it would feel like for me when I have one drink too many. I struggle to sleep, I can't get comfortable because my body's achy and I feel anxious. So, as crazy as it sounds, after 30 days, I felt pretty darn content with my decision to move forward being gluten free. Obviously, my body can't tolerate gluten well, and I'm actually happier without it. And, in case you're wondering, yes, my blood work did improve after those initial 30 days. Since learning that I can't tolerate gluten, I've experimented with removing all sorts of things from my diet because now I'm very curious what else irritates me or what else helps my body thrive. And I certainly now know that my body thrives with minimal dairy and with minimal processed foods. But nothing, I mean nothing, negatively affects me like gluten does. So that is my gluten story. And while gluten may not be an issue for your body, I would encourage you to start to get quiet. Listen to your body and be curious. It absolutely amazes me what our bodies can tell us, or what they're at least attempting to tell us that we may not be hearing because we're not necessarily listening. Thanks again for joining me this week. Come back again next week. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to How Long Till Bedtime. To learn how we can work together to improve your child's sleep, please visit sleepandwellnesscoach.com.